this evening. Huge thanks to you for joining us this evening at the end of a long, noisy and very cold, chilly autumnal / wintry day. Hope that you're wrapped up warm this evening, and thank you again for joining us for this next hour or so as we look, like I said, at the joys and the challenges of engaging in church alongside our wonderful families. And you're involved in youth ministry, in children's ministry, toddler ministry, whether you're a church leader, a ministry leader, a small group leader, whatever concert come to us from this evening, just a massive welcome on behalf of us all. So let me introduce myself. My name is Rachel Heffer. I serve as head of mission at the Evangelical. And like I said, over this next hour or so, our hope is that actually, as we unpack this new piece of research, which digs deeper into actually the impact of the pandemic on the church in terms of our families and our family discipleship, we'd love to draw out some of the key themes and our findings of actually how the church can be responding to families in this current and pending season. I'll tell you a little bit about more about that in just a moment's time, but just a bit of housekeeping to make tonight run nice and smoothly. We will be recording tonight's session, so if you'd prefer not to have your face on the screen, then do feel free to turn your camera off. We'd love to hear from you in the chat, so even as you're joining us now, if you're sitting comfortably, please do feel free to put your name, maybe your role or your context and your where you're dialing in from this evening. If you could put those in the chat for us, that would be brilliant to get a feel for who you are and where you are. Please do stay muted if you're able to during the course of all the different people that will be feeding into this evening. But as I said, the space on the chat is yours to please use it as you will, and do interact with us and each other. That would be brilliant. If you'd like the live transcript to come up on your screen, there is a click box for you to do that. So do feel free to use that as well. But as we get started this evening, I hope that actually all that you'll hear will actually both inspire and encourage, maybe challenge, but certainly resource you. We've got a variety of speakers unpacking this research and hopefully adding some packing around that will just serve you in your spaces and in your context. So as we move on, let me just give you just a little bit of background as to what brings us here this evening. So myself and a number of others have been part of looking at actually how as a church and how have families journeyed through COVID in this period of this roller coaster that we've all been in and through. And what we've been noticing, and I'm sure many of you will have seen the same, is that actually the patterns of people engagement with church life, particularly those of families and of children, may have changed. In some cases dramatically, in others you might have just seen a little bit of it. But during COVID, you might have seen some changes that you're now grappling with in your different contexts. So we noticed that in some cases, less families were returning to church and wanted to dig a little bit deeper into why that might be. So that's part of the basis for the backdrop of this piece of research, which you'll hear more about in just a few moments. Where it comes from is through a collaboration of organisations, and those organisations are ourselves at the Evangelical Alliance, along with Hope Together, with Share Jesus International, with Care for the Family, and with Wonderful Parenting for Faith. So those are the organisations that have been involved. And the research was carried out earlier this year in February 2022 by Dr. Sarah Holmes, who you'll hear from in just a moment, for Liverpool Hope University, along with Anne Casson from Canterbury Christ Church University, and also a former colleague of mine, Rich Powney, at the Evangelical Alliance. So it's relatively hot off the press just earlier this year, and we've got some findings that we'd love to share with you. The way that it was conducted was an online survey of leaders, Christian leaders, but also Christian parents who we surveyed to basically be asking not just how the church had responded and what they'd done to serve their families during COVID, but from Christian parents' perspective, actually what worked or what didn't, what met the mark, what helped them in their discipleship at home with children, or again, what didn't. And some fascinating findings have come out through the research. So just lastly, we noticed some trends, some of which will be pulled out as our main themes in just a few moments' time, but they're all available in the full report, and hopefully you'll find in the chat the link to that research, or you might have seen it already as you signed up for this webinar. So all that remains for me to say is welcome again. We hope that it really serves you well. But I'm going to pass over now straight to Dr. Sarah Holmes, who's going to start to unpack just the first one of our big findings through this research. So Sarah, over to you.
Thanks very much, Rachel. That's really helpful context setting. So the first big theme, there was 3 big themes, and I'll talk to you about those this evening. The first big thing was about the experience of families. As Rachel said, we've noticed there was a reduced engagement in many settings from families. And we asked Christian parents, how is this for you? How are you experiencing this? And many were saying, we still attend church regularly, but not as much as we used to. And so that was an interesting thing for us to observe. Also, they were saying that they still very much were people of faith, very much active in faith in the home, but less engaged with church. And so we unpacked a little bit, what was their experience of church? And the big thing that was coming through so much was about the welcome. So there were many families who were saying, we are so excited that churches have reopened, we're able to connect again, we're able to have those relational connections and so on. And it's really great to see that. And it's important that we learn from those places where it's working really well. There were other families who said, actually, we've realised due to the pandemic, we really want to have a bit more quality time together, and Sunday mornings is a time when we can do that. So we have quite a tension really, deciding, do we attend church where often we don't get time together because we're split up from our children, they go off to Sunday school or whatever, or do we have family time together, quality time? So there was some people saying those sorts of things. And then there was a third group of people, particularly in the interviews, who were telling us time and time again stories of how they tried to go back after the pandemic, but had very unwelcoming experiences. So people who'd gone and found just it was super hard to attend with young children, which perhaps it always was hard before, but it felt even harder after the pandemic. One, probably the most extreme story that we heard was where a parent attended church with the children for the first time post-pandemic, and at the end of the service somebody came over and said, actually, could you get your children to wear slippers next week please, because they were too noisy in the service. And she said, that doesn't make me want to come back, you know. And that was quite an extreme, but there were many other stories similar but different sorts of things where people were reporting they were trying to reconnect but feeling not very welcome. And so I think that's one of the big things for us to think about as churches. How can we make sure that not just by saying you're welcome, but what's the ethos? How is it in practice working out? And part of that, when we interviewed children and said, what did they like about church? What did they appreciate about church? One of the big things they were saying was that they had a part to play. So there were some children who sang in the choir, some who helped on the PA desk, some who did readings, some who were involved welcoming on the door, praying in services, different things like that. And they felt welcome, they felt a part, and so they wanted to come to that. And so what we found was that a quarter of church leaders said they didn't know how the pandemic had impacted families in their church spiritually, which really surprised us. And so one of the biggest things that we're encouraging out of this research is conversations, church leaders and parents talking together to see how can we make our churches a more welcoming, more encouraging, more affirming sort of place for parents and for children to come to. So that's the first kind of big theme really that came out of the research. I'm going to hand over to Anna now to unpack this a little bit more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. So one of the things we get to do at Parenting for Faith is to help churches to enable families and parents to feel welcomed and supported and excited to come to church. So we're going to do a little exercise now that I hope is going to help us to understand this a little bit better. Now, it is going to involve you interacting. So if you can get ready in the chat. I would like you to imagine that you look at your calendar for tomorrow. You haven't looked yet. And you see that you have a dentist appointment. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you about this? 1 is, oh no, your heart sinks. 10 is, yippee, I can't wait. So write in the chat now, how excited are you to find that you have a dentist appointment tomorrow? I'm seeing some 1s, some 5s, some 2s, anything above, lots of 1s and 2s, anything else? Oh, there was an 8. I did see that 8. 351. Okay, some of you are not very excited. You're not very happy about this. Tell me why. Start telling me in the chat. Why are you not super excited about going to the dentist? I'll share why I don't like going. Is it's very personal. They, look in quite a private place inside your mouth. They're right in your face. And I feel very judged. I know I should be brushing my teeth 3 times a day and flossing and visiting the hygienist and all the extra things. And I sort of want to. And I know they're good people who want to help me. Yeah, you get told you're not going to get brushing enough. There's anxiety, there's expense. And you can just feel a little bit like you're trying your best with what you've got, but actually you don't really measure up. And that's often how parents and carers say that they feel coming into church. They want to be doing the right things. They know that they should be reading the Bible and praying with their children and starting faith conversations. But life happens and it's hard. And sometimes when it comes to church, it can feel like it's a place where we're going to be told we don't measure up, or we're going to feel like that, even though the church wants the best for us and they're good people with lots of knowledge and experience. So what's the alternative? Let's change the scenario. Okay, so you look back in your calendar, turns out it was a mistake. It wasn't the dentist at all. You are going tomorrow for a trip to IKEA. How are you feeling about that on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 is, this is my worst nightmare, I don't want to go. 10 is, woohoo, this sounds great. Yeah, we got some 1s as well, but I'm seeing some 7s, some 9s, some 8s. Yeah, we've got some IKEA haters. There are always some IKEA haters, but I'm going to say generally, we've got a wahey reaction that people prefer IKEA to the dentist, and that we as churches and church leaders can be a little bit more like IKEA because they do a few things right. And there are some things that we can learn from them. So what IKEA does is it creates windows into normal life. When you walk into those display rooms and those showrooms, it's not like when you go and visit a beautiful National Trust property and you go, oh, wow, this is amazing. I could never live here. This doesn't look anything like my home. You walk in and you think, oh, yes, interesting. I've already got one of those. And this is about the size and shape of what I've got, or I can see how this would work in my setting. It gives people a little glimpse into someone else's life, and that inspires them to make changes and to try things out in their own life. How can we be doing that into church? How can we create windows and give them glimpses into normal everyday life of how people are connecting with God and finding faith in their families? The second thing that they do really well is they display the range. If you go to IKEA to buy a chair, there is not just one chair. There are 70 chairs. There are all different colors, all different shapes, all different sizes, all different textures, all different prices. And you can go and have a look and say, oh, just thought I wanted a chair, but look at all these possibilities. How interesting. I don't like that one. I love that one. Not sure about that. And you can go along with your personal style and budget and the function that you want and see a whole range of different options. We mean it really well, but sometimes in church, we give people a suggestion and we say, you could do this at home, or you should be doing this at home. And they think, no, you don't know my family, you don't know my situation, that's not going to work for us. And so they just write it off. They write off the whole idea. But actually, if we can present a core truth or a value or something that's important and display a range of options so people can look and see and try out and find something that works for them and their family, that feels a lot more encouraging and affirming. And the third thing that I would suggest that IKEA do really well is that they let people try things out. You can sit on the chairs, you can lie on the beds, you can open the drawers, you can press all the buttons and see what it's like in practice. And I think we can do that with faith as well. If we frame the journey of parents and carers guiding children and young people as an exploration, a journey of discovering new things, of trying, of testing, it's not a case of pick up this one devotional or do these prayers in this certain way, and if it doesn't work, that's it. But if we can encourage them to keep exploring as their family changes and grows, then I think that's really helpful and really encouraging for them. So we as the church can be like IKEA. We can say to parents and carers and families, God has a great plan for you, your children and your family. You know your children best. You're the expert in them. Your family is unique, and we are here to just support you and to encourage you and help you as you do that. So it's just something you can use as a little check-in. I do it in my church, and I know lots of other people do as well. We've been using this analogy for a little while. Just a check of, are we being like IKEA, or are we being like the dentist? What's the experience of parents and carers who are coming to this event, or reading this email, or this WhatsApp, or this newsletter, or being part of this service? So yeah, you can use that to check. I'm going to hand back to Sarah now, who's going to pull out the next big key finding that she found in her research.
Great, thanks, Anna. That's really great. And so we're talking there about, you know, what's the experience there for families. And moving on now to the second key finding, which was about a lot of disconnection, really. So we asked church leaders what they thought parents and families wanted, and we asked parents what they wanted from church, and we asked children what they kind of found helpful from church. And there was different kind of opinions about all of this, really. But the one thing that came through so strongly was that people wanted partnership. Everybody wanted partnership. So 99% of the parents that we asked wanted to work in partnership with the local church to help their child's faith to develop. And likewise, 98% of church leaders wanted to work in partnership to help with the parents to help the faith of children. And this was so exciting to us, who are kind of championing for this to happen, and really exciting. But when we looked then through the data to say, how does this translate? How does this look in terms of the actual activity of the church? Then actually we weren't seeing quite so much evidence of partnership. And it was really quite striking, really, that everybody's wanting partnership, but perhaps it's not happening in reality. And so a lot of what we were sort of looking at and hearing was about the language that's conveying. So whilst churches might say we want to be in partnership, actually the language and the ethos and the patterns that were happening on a Sunday tended to be reinforcing the idea that the church was the main provider of faith nurture for a child, and parents could tap into that and use that. Sorry a second. Sorry. And so it was really quite clear that everybody was wanting partnership. So I think this is really exciting in terms of the possibilities that are there, because you know, this doesn't mean we have to go and invent lots and lots more hours of activity, lots more programmed events, many more resources. Actually, what people were wanting was relationships. They were wanting that sense of the church being in partnership with them in a relational way, connecting together, just making contact and talking about how we can work together to support children's faith. In fact, 88% of parents wanted resources from church to equip them in sharing their faith with their children, not necessarily just sheets and all that kind of thing, but how can I help my child to learn more about Jesus? How can I pray with my child? And those sorts of things. So really, again, this thing of, as Anna was talking about there, you know, really evaluating what is the experience, what is the language, what is the ethos going on in our churches. And I'm going to hand over in a moment to Sammy and Rachel, who kind of bring a very missional edge to all of this, which is really great, because we spoke to people who are in church or connected with church. And so again, you know, we're wanting, aren't we, to reach out to families who are on the periphery and beyond as well. So I'm going to hand, Sammy couldn't be with us tonight, so I'm going to just share this with you now. She's talking through from her organisation.
Hello, my name's Sammy Jordan. I work for Hope Together UK, where I run the project Hope for Every Home. Hope Together is about everyone everywhere coming to know Jesus, and Hope for Every Home is the bit that focuses on the homes, on the streets, the communities, the roads where we live. One of the things about Hope Together is that we very rarely do anything on our own. That word together is very important. And so it's been a real blessing to work together on this important research with Sarah, Liverpool Hope, and the rest of the team. Here at Hope, we definitely believe that together is stronger. And research is very important to us. Everything that we do is informed and is a response to research. We did some research earlier this year in March called Talking Jesus, which showed the importance of relationships when it comes to people finding faith. And the most important relationship of all is that of family. Talking Jesus showed that people are most likely to have an owned adult faith if they're brought up in a Christian family, and that people are far more likely to come to faith under the age of 18 than at any other point in their lives. So it means that supporting relationships and reaching out and supporting families are key priorities for Hope Together and Hope for Every Home. One of the ways we do this is in response to some more research that we did. So Hope Together ran some research in March 2020 called Talking Toddlers. And that suggests that 3/4, so 74% of parents of children of under 5 said they have a connection with a local church through activities for their children. And 55% of that 74% said it made them think about their own faith. So this showed us that young families are a massive missional opportunity for the church. And we know that the world for young families at the moment is a very challenging one and hard to navigate. So we run quarterly webinars called Talking Toddlers, aimed at resourcing and supporting and being intentional about faith with our youngest children. It's for parents, but it's especially for anyone who's involved in a church toddler group. To go alongside that, we produce some stories called God's Big Story resources. So these are books which tell individual stories from the Bible, but through the lens of the big story. We work with the Early Learning Centre, who let us use their Happy Land toys to tell the story. Always, though, through that lens of God's big story. We really want children to grow up knowing that the world isn't meant to be like this, that God does love them and he does love the world, but it's broken. And each story comes with a free to download animation, action song, toddler group resources from Bible Buds, and also all age church resources too. Finally, to show that families and supporting faith at home is a key part of our priorities, it's right there as we plan our next kind of big initiative, which is Hope 23-24, a united year of mission. Hope Together is working across denominations and with many organisations to support and resource a year of mission across the UK from September 23 to September 24. I have the privilege of working with some fantastic people on the Children and Families Working Group. And this research into families, faith and COVID will be pivotal to our approach. It will inform our strategy. It will mean that we will focus on tools that support relationships and conversations that support and nurture faith at home, not on worksheets. They're not very popular, are they? And on those big programmes and activities and initiatives. So the Families, Faith and COVID research will actually continue to shape all that we do in Hope and Hope for Every Home to support and resource the kingdom work with young families. So really excited to work with you all and to see what the future brings. Bye-bye.
Thanks to Sammy as she introduces not only the work there of Hope Together, but also some of those resources and pieces of research which we hope will be of interest to you too. Just picking up on one of those aspects that Sammy mentioned there, the Talking Toddlers research, really pivotal for so many looking at that as a mission field. If you're interested in joining us for that, then there is actually a webinar tomorrow morning at 10 till 11:30 a.m, which if you go to either the EA or Hope website, do log on and come and join us for that if that might serve you as well. Sarah mentioned earlier, as did Sammy, that actually so much of what came out of this faith and family research, looking back to COVID and looking at how the church responds now, is about relationship. But not just to those inside the church, but also as our responsibility to the church, looking at our communities and those on our doorstep. I'd love to just take a few moments for us to turn that gaze outwards to look at actually how do we as Christians, how do we as the church interact with those who may be on the margins or the fringe or loosely connected to our church context. I'm going to just take a few moments of your time to introduce you to some big picture research as well called the Talking Jesus research. Sammy just mentioned it there. in her video, but just to pull out a few threads which hopefully again just help fuse this conversation around actually how can we be relating to families, to children, to young people within our context in a way that's applicable. We surveyed 4,000 adults earlier this year, and this survey, the Talking Jesus research, which is at talkingjesus.org, free to download if you'd like to take a better look at it. But 4,000 people were surveyed across different regions and gender and ethnicity and so on. And here's just a snapshot of a few of the things that came out when we as the church and as leaders looked at actually asking people, if you, as families, as adults, as young people, if you were to even start to explore faith, where would you look? You might be interested to know that maybe unsurprisingly, the top answer was that 26% of people would go to Google, but closely followed by 22% who would go to the Bible, and a further 22%, the second top answer, who said that they would go to their local church. So again, it just reminds us, doesn't it, the importance of, yes, Google, that safe space maybe in the digital, but the importance of the church as we look to help people on their journeys into faith. We also asked people if they knew a practicing Christian, and 53% of people said that they did. 53% of non-Christians said that they knew a practicing Christian, who by our accounts for the research is somebody who goes to church monthly and would say that they read the Bible and pray weekly. And they knew us really well. They knew us, 35% of people said they knew us as friend first and foremost, and 33% said we were a family member. So people know us, they know us well, they're a peer, a family member or a friend. Or even further down in our statistics was a neighbour, a work colleague, and so on. But what came out next was that not only do they know us and know us well, but they really like us. The top answers were that they know and think that we're good-hearted, we're generous, we're friendly, and we're kind. And so all of these hopefully build the picture that there really is a space for us to be intentional in our relationships, as you already heard this evening. I'm going to share my screen just to show you a couple more statistics that link into, again, how we can see this state of the nation in terms of evangelism, of what's pivotal for us in this conversation about faith and the family. Well, we asked this question: how do people actually come to faith? And from the survey, this is what we found, that actually overriding top answer there was that 34% of those surveyed said that they came to faith because they grew up in a Christian family. Shows again just that importance of these questions around actually how do we help as the church, as families together, how do we actually nurture each other and nurture our families in our church context to really be effective in that. You can see there the second answer was that people come to faith through reading the Bible, but also through all of these other elements. That there's so many here and on the following couple of slides that I'll show you around the importance of church services there, around Sunday school, about a spiritual experience that might come through not only our events or our services or our Sunday schools, but actually through those interactions. When we asked what people remembered from interactions with a Christian, it came out that they remembered actually being asked their own opinions as well, not just having stories shared with them. So again, that sense of dialogue and relationship. Also, as you can see here, people come to faith through particular life events, and that's particularly pivotal amongst the 18-plus-year-olds. That's something around a funeral service or grief, a difficult life experience or a crisis moment actually draws them to explore faith further or come to faith themselves. You can see here as the list goes on, the fact that actually through attending church school, through involvement in a youth club, through printed media, through conversations, and attending other events or courses like Alpha or Christianity Explored. Again, the pivotal ways in which our churches can be really instrumental in people taking those steps towards greater, deeper faith in Jesus. We went on to ask people this: what was the age at which, if you are a practicing Christian, what age at which did you come to faith? And again, this was mentioned earlier, the significance here of engaging with young people. What this shows us here is the overriding top answer was 33% who on our survey signalled that they would say they came to faith birth. Again, some of the leaders that we spoke to would question actually in terms of our discipleship, what does that show us maybe about people's understanding of decision making and faith? But really importantly here, if you look at the age bracket 0 to 24, and particularly 0 to 18, you'll see there again that investment is so key, isn't it, with younger age ranges. because that's when the majority of people under the age of 18 do come to faith. However, it's worth saying that what's really encouraging here is the fact that people do come to faith at all ages. And so our ministry across the board through our churches with families and intergenerational ministry is really important. And lastly, I just thought I'd leave you with this question or stat from the research that you can get hold of and look deeper into. When we asked what questions are people asking, this is what we found. That the top overriding question there was this one right in the middle there: will everything be okay? Closely followed by what will make me happy at 17%. And then an unchanging question through our survey, both this one and back in 2015 when we did the same, was this one at 13%, what happens when you die? But I thought really interesting that in the context of all that we're looking at in terms of COVID, coming out of the pandemic, this question of will everything be okay gives us an openness, doesn't it, to actually be really seeking to be intentional and effective, engaging with our families, children, youth, and indeed older folks within our context, so that we're really shaping what we do and how we do it in a way that will really meet that sense of openness and question asking that maybe this unleveled ground under us during the roller coaster of COVID that we've been through actually gives the openness to be able to speak real truth and hope into people's scenario, missional context. So I hope that gives you just a snapshot or a flavour of the Talking Jesus research, and again against this context of the faith and family research that we're looking at today. So I'll pause there and at this point stop sharing my screen so that we can hand back to Sarah for our next big item that came through the research.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Really, really helpful. And that's such fascinating research as well. And the third strand that came through in our families and faith research was that we were really surprised, I think, by this in a way, that 89% of the parents said, yes, we've perhaps reduced engagement with the local church, but our faith as a family has stayed the same or increased. And that was really, really encouraging, because I think sometimes perhaps we have this perception, oh, people are not attending at our, Sunday service or whatever. And therefore, faith is, not there. But, as Rachel was saying, just from that other Talking Jesus research, actually it's showing that people value church still. And even if perhaps they're not attending in the traditional ways or the ways that we're expecting or wanting, actually, there is still that tacit faith, that ongoing faith happening in the home. And so we said, what sort of support then do you want as Christian parents? We were, again, very surprised. Only 2% said that they'd found worksheets helpful in terms of supporting their child's or family's faith, which is such a shame, because I know so many people spend hours and hours making these activity sheets and so on. And but actually what people were wanting was relational things, relational contact, that sense of encouraging in a relational way and providing support to equip them on their child's faith journey in that sort of way. And this is great, because this is easy wins. If we can slightly change the ethos of what we're doing, the language of what we're doing, to just change that, we don't need to put hours and hours and hours more in to generating resources, but focus instead on those relational times, on those times of equipping, or how can we, through what we're already doing, how can we equip and encourage and empower parents in sharing their faith in the home. Another thing that as part of this was coming through was people were saying, actually we want that kind of spiritual focus, not always just perhaps a social focus. Sometimes there's time for social focus, but people were really craving, parents really craving that spiritual feeding from church. And there were some ideas coming through from parents about, for example, a spiritual retreat for parents, deliberately to kind of nourish their faith and feed into them. Other people saying it would be really helpful if the church could facilitate peer support, so gathering together a group of parents so that they can talk together and share ideas about faith together in that kind of way. And so these were the sorts of things that were coming through in terms of what's helpful in terms of supporting a focus on relational encouragement and equipping, rather than on producing lots and lots of resources and activities and so on. Now, we're joined by Andy tonight, who is representing the Kitchen Table Project. Actually, that's just one thing I wanted to say before I hand over to Andy. The exciting thing is that these organisations who are here tonight have amazing resources. And, you know, there's no need for us as churches to kind of reinvent the wheel as such, because these organisations have such an amazing range of resources. And so they're going to share some of them to equip you as churches now. So I'll hand over to Andy to talk about what the Kitchen Table Project has got.
Hi there, guys. My name is Andy Frost. I'm wearing two hats tonight. My first hat is working for Care for the Family on the Kitchen Table Project. The idea that the kitchen table in our house is a place where we eat food. It's where we do last minute homework, and it's also where I beat my kids at Uno. So it's kind of that kind of important table. But also it's where we talk about faith, that faith is passed on in the everyday of life. And so with Care for the Family, looking at this research now, it's been really helpful to help frame what we're doing. And there are three common words we often use. They are to, for, and with. That often we do things to parents or do things for parents. But there's something really powerful about doing something with parents and carers, with families coming alongside. And three really kind of practical things. I've got a little link in the chat there. The first one is the importance of conversation. I think it's really important that as churches, we come alongside parents and we really listen well to what parents are wrestling with, how things are going, what's working, what isn't working. That could be done in a one-on-one setting. It could be done in a group setting. I took on at my church the kind of kids work for 3 weeks during lockdown. Ended up being a year of a kids church via Zoom. It was a nightmare, but it was really important actually coming alongside parents, sharing best practice. Actually, since then, we've continued that conversation. And even tonight, my parents next door, my wife is next door running a kind of course looking at parenting. So the importance of conversation, first of all. Second of all, about collaboration. Now, it isn't just about one group doing children's work, but how do we as the church come together to share in the joy of inspiring faith in our children? To think through, how do we do this as a congregation? How can what happens on a Sunday morning be a springboard into the rest of the week? How can we make connections intergenerationally? The second thing on the link there is a thing called Feast, which is basically a little print-off thing you can use to have a conversation over a meal. We found actually meal times are really good times to actually gather the wider church and to share stories across generations that inspire faith, and talk about different people's testimonies and experiences of God, whereby kids listening to the elderly listening to kids, this cross-generational thing taking place. So conversations, collaborations, and then third of all, courses. And we've put them together called the Raising Faith course, which again, the link is in the chat there for you now. And again, we found it's really helpful as a way to again come alongside parents to create space for conversation about what's working, what isn't working, and to have some input that helps frame the conversation on some of those key things, like how do we best encourage our kids to engage with the Bible stories? How do we best encourage our kids to understand how to pray? Some really practical things there. So for me, it's about conversation, collaboration, and some courses. Anna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'm going to chuck out a few more ideas as well. And I'm going to use some examples from Parenting for Faith, because those are the resources I'm most familiar with. But please don't just focus on the resources. What I would love is IKEA style to inspire you with a range, and for you to see the creativity with which churches up and down the country have listened to parents, have found ways to build community, to welcome, like Sarah's been talking, to make it faith-based, to get families talking and to give them confidence and tools to help their children and teens meet and know God at home. So if I start off, Andy mentioned courses. So you could use any of these with the Raising Faith course, but course can sound a little bit scary, can't it? It can sound a little bit dentisty and like should and commitment and a bit hard, but it doesn't have to be like that. So these are some of the different ways that people have used some of the Parenting for Faith courses. So some people have watched it in advance. They've just said to people, hey, this week, one time, instead of watching Netflix whilst you're sorting the washing in the evening, why not pop on an episode of the course? It's just half an hour, it's free, it's online, it doesn't need to be big and scary. We've got people who've done things like, this bottom one, this was a church in the Cotswolds, and the family said, we'd really like to do this, we'd like some more skills, but we cannot commit to another thing in the week, another thing in the diary. So for a term, they took their after school kids club, and the kids did something different. They watched films for a term, and the parents took that time to explore the Parenting for Faith course, and then they all met together for spaghetti bolognese. There's a lot of food here. I noticed when Andy was talking about feast, most of the good ideas have food. Another one of my favourites, this was 2 churches next door to each other in Hertfordshire, and they got together and said, okay, one of us is going to offer this course with cheese and wine on a Friday night, and the other one is going to offer it with coffee and pastries on a Saturday morning. And we're going to open it to anyone from either congregation. And what that did was enable people to find a time that worked for them. It enabled 2 parent families, one to go one the other, or to swap babysitting with other people. It looked at what was the time that was best for them, what would really treat them and feel special and relaxing and like a nice night out or morning out. People who did it as a sermon series, so it wasn't another thing to go to, but part of what was going on at church. People who adapted it and just came together to chat about it. Let me give you some age-specific examples. So we have got, for example, a book about nurturing faith in babies and toddlers. And I say book, it's really a chunky pamphlet. It's really slim, really easy to read. And so some churches have felt, okay, in this age of screens and phones, and actually we really want to give people something physical, and that feels like a gift and a blessing to them. So this is a church in Bristol that has made packs for when people have a new baby, and it's a welcome gift from the church with something for the older siblings, and they offer to cook meals. They've clearly got good budget, so they've got a nice little baby grow in there as well. But you could adapt that to any setting. In other places, people have said, no, we don't want books. They're not going to get read. They're going to be put on a shelf somewhere. And we've created some little 5-minute videos about nurturing faith in under 5s. And some people have sent these out on WhatsApp or email. And there's a lot of other groups. I was talking to one this week in Glasgow that are using them within a pregnancy group or a baby group or a toddler group. Often those are primarily social and about gathering people from the community, but this is like a little bit of input and thought for the day and just helping people to spiritually nurture their children. Lots of people using that for people coming for christening and dedication, Thanksgiving, those sorts of things. Other places say, we don't want videos, we don't want a book, but we've got some takeaway sheets which say, we may have talked about this or discussed it, or maybe we have watched the video, but we know that your brain was in a million different places, your toddler was screaming, your baby, you were feeding your baby. So let us actually just give you some key things to take away that's really easy, gives you a next step if you're interested. And on that as well, there's things like playlists, links to playlists, so we can say, hey, really easy, really simple thing you can do is just play some more Christian music around the home. When you want to get everyone excited and a bit energized, here's some upbeat music. When you want to chill everyone out and calm them down, here's some calm music. You won't like it all. You're not expected to like it all, but it's just displaying the range, just giving you some ideas of things that might be interesting to you. One of the things we get asked for a lot is a kind of simple visual reminder of things that parents would like support in. So things like answering questions, getting kids chatting to God, handling Halloween, starting or changing school. And so we produce all of this, by the way, is completely free, apart from books for obvious reasons. But these little postcards that you can print out at church or get printed or send people the image, really simple, can put it somewhere visual and use the QR code if they want more. We do some bigger ones like 101 ways to start a conversation with God, 101 ways to spark an interesting conversation with your child, and not prescriptive again in how this is used. I know people who have them in their toilets, in their cars, by their beds, and just say, hey, let's pick one out, see if it sparks something in the child or the teenager and they want to talk about something. Again, it's displaying a range, it's giving ideas, giving people a springboard, starting them off, but letting them find what works for their family and their situation. Podcasts work really well in some contexts. People like them because they can do it whilst they're commuting or exercising or doing jobs around the house. You can do it with the kids there as well. So we have people who encourage their families and parents to subscribe to a podcast. Parenting for Faith has one. Faith in Kids have a really good one as well. And we also know people who have there's one in Liverpool, a podcast club. So think like a book club, but without the effort of having to read a book. So they listen to the podcast in the week and then get together over coffee to chat about it. And we do events on Facebook Live for parents as well. And we've heard from parents time and time again that they really want equipping, they want support to be able to talk to their children and teenagers about these issues, big things like money, sexuality, exams, decision-making. But it's really hard to commit regularly. And so what we're doing is we're putting these evenings on for free, and you can just rock up. So that could be putting it on the big screen in your church if you have those facilities. It could be a couple of people in someone's home putting it on the telly or a laptop or a tablet. Or it could be that you just send a link and people watch it at home and then have a Zoom conversation afterwards. But really we're saying, don't worry about the content. There are loads of organisations who can provide content. You've heard some from the Kitchen Table Project, and you're going to be hearing some more from other ideas as well. Don't worry about reinventing the wheel. We've got loads of stuff to support you, but you provide the safe space, provide the coffee, provide the hospitality, provide the warm welcome and the space for people to chat, and we'll support you and help you with the content. So I think I'm handing back now to Andy, who hopefully has changed his hat so that he is now Share Jesus International instead of the Kitchen Table Project. Over to you, Andy.
Yes, that's my second cat now. So with my other charity, we do also work looking at churches, how they can become missionally more minded and how they can reach out to their communities. But really from this research today, I'm so aware that for so many churches, there are so many things we could be doing, working out how we best use our time and our energy is such an important question. So for me, there are three things to think through. I think first of all, it's this, is what is our vision? Why do we do what we do? What do we want to see happen, not just in the next few weeks, but in the next 5 to 10 years? What are our hopes and dreams for the children and young people in our churches? And to really kind of grasp and even to write down what our vision is so important that it becomes part of our agenda. We keep coming back to thinking, this is actually our bigger vision. This is why we do what we do. So the first thing is, what is our vision? The second thing is, what do we already have? The idea of an asset-based approach is what they often use in development. The idea of actually, what have we already got? I love that story in the Bible of Moses at the burning bush, and God says, what's in your hand? It's a staff, and he throws it on the floor and it becomes a snake. I wish I could do that. It'd be an amazing party trick, wouldn't it, to be able to do that with a staff and out goes a snake. The idea of what has God already given us? What do we currently do? Often we look around saying, oh, I wish I was that church or that church or that church. But what has God given to you as a church, as a community? Who are the people that are part of your church? What are the resources that are available? We often have far more than we realize. So the first thing is, what is our vision? The second thing is, what do we already have? And thirdly, what are we going to do to get towards where we want to get to with our children and young people? Plotting out a plan. And things will change. We now know with COVID that nothing is ever certain. Things will shift and change, but creating some stepping stones, thinking how we might try and develop things going forward to support families in this faith adventure. Often we've adopted things that have been going for many generations, and sometimes it's right to actually say we're going to stop doing these things to do something different instead. I think sometimes as church we can think, well, if we start a project, it has to continue until Jesus returns, but we can close things down as well. So what is our vision? What we already have? And how we're going to get towards seeing that vision fulfilled? What are the stepping stones to make that happen? Sarah, back to you.
Great, thanks, Andy. And so as we're starting to come towards the end, we want you to be kind of perhaps thinking about, in your context, which of these different bits apply. How can you take this and put it into practice in your setting? But I wanted to spend a moment to ask you as well, if you could perhaps type in the chat, what may be helpful? What do you feel the needs are in terms of, sessions like this that you could dip in and out of, but for church leadership, for, helping congregations, ethos and so on, to bring this more into practice, really. So, are there any particular needs or areas that you, as church leaders, as those in congregations, those involved in ministry, think would be helpful to discuss as one-off sessions or as sort of a series or whatever? So just wanted to mention that now, as we're sort of starting to come together. If you could just type those into the chat in the next few minutes, that would be really, really helpful. But Andy, I'm going to hand back to you again now, just to kind of help us to perhaps get this all distilled into our minds
I
a bit.
think there was just so much there. So many stats and information is really helpful and different resources. But I think, can we just be quiet now for 25 seconds? Is that all right? And just really ask God, what is he saying to us now in this moment for this first step going forward? Just be quiet for a moment, then I'll pray. Father God, we can just seem so overwhelmed by all those stats and ideas. But we just ask, Father, in the quietness now, you might help us to think about the one thing that we can do practically to move this forwards. We long to see families released into their calling and purpose. We long to see kids discover more of who you are and who they're called to be. God, help us to process these ideas and just know what is the next thing you've got in store for us to do. So speak to us, God, in this moment now, but also in the hours and weeks ahead. Give us a clear idea of what you're calling us to do in our different places. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Andy. That kind of draws our time together as a close. Just in these remaining few minutes, please do, if you've got, as Sarah said, any particular suggestions that you think off the back of all that you've seen or heard, or from your context and where you're at, what would really be helpful to you, then please do continue to put those in the chat. But off the back of this evening, again, we just want to say a massive thank you to you. Thank you for your time in joining us. Thank you for engaging with us. We hope and pray and trust that something of what we've shared across our different organisations and this piece of research is helpful to you this evening, but helpful hopefully for you to share with others, or again, keep connected to us and come back to us. Our hope and our prayer, I'm sure with you as well, is that we just have that ongoing sense of togetherness, of unity, of cheering each other on and championing each other, but really that prayerful discernment as well of what God is doing in and through his church. And we believe and trust, don't we, going into this wonderful Christmas season in a few weeks' time, dare I say, and looking ahead to the year ahead, rather, that God goes ahead of us and that will equip us in all these many ways to really see many more people through families, through our young people's groups, children's group, to really come to know him and have a greater faith in him. So let me just pray as we just draw our time together to a close and go on from here. Let's just pray. Lord, off the back of all that we've seen and heard, again, as Andy said, Jesus, I just pray for each one of us. May we take one or two things away that just seem a golden nugget of thought for us to simmer on or reflect on further. Lord, thank you for your protective hand over all of us and the ministries that we serve. We just ask the Holy Spirit, even in this moment and in the weeks to come, I pray for my friends here that you would just equip us, strengthen us, resource us, refresh us. Lord, I pray, give us insight and great wisdom, particularly looking ahead to this Christmas season. We pray, Lord, that through all the ministries that we're a part of, alongside these wonderful children, young people, families, and beyond that we're a part of, Lord, we just entrust ourselves to you and pray, Jesus, that this would truly be a season, and indeed into the coming year, where we would see many people come to know you for the first time or grow in a deeper knowledge of you. So we ask for your wisdom, your protection, your blessing, your favour to be with us all. In Jesus' name I ask, amen. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do stay connected. We hope it's been useful for you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we hope to be in touch with you again very soon. So every blessing, goodbye from me and the team. Thanks again.